Hello, hello! You are listening to Clancy Pasta Tonight. I'm your host, Clancy Pasta. I hope you're having a great night tonight. It is currently Sunday, June 22nd. And, you know, tonight is a very special night because it marks the beginning of a brand new show. You see, in the past when I would do live streams, and it's been a long time, I would basically just come on a chat, and we would just talk back and forth the whole time. I would be reading the live chat, and it would be a grand old time. Maybe I'd be playing a video game in the background, but that's not what we're doing tonight. Tonight is the inaugural episode of, like I said, the brand new show Clancy Pasta Tonight, which is where you will hear the brand new Clancy Pasta narrations first. And that's because we're starting a whole new format. We are going back to basics, okay? We are no longer gonna be sitting around and just playing it safe and spending a billion years editing stories and getting out one story a month or something, which happens sometimes, and having a million other videos that never end up getting released because I'm not happy with them. I'm writing a new rule book. We are recording live. No edits, no nothing at all. It's like we're literally sitting around a campfire and we're gonna be telling some scary stories. And I really think that is pretty exciting. So I want everyone to give a huge welcome and shout out and thanks and hello to my main man. He is going to be the show's DJ and live audio designer. You're going to hear him a lot. He's going to be a big part of the show. Say hi to Skeevy Weevil. How you doing? All right, good. So we're going to be starting with Forgotten Tales. So basically the first segment, there's going to be a few segments. The first segment is going to be a bunch of old classic creepypasta stories you might have heard, but you probably haven't. I'm not going to be reading tonight anyways, any of like the classics like Dead Bart or something like that. We're going to be delving into some stories that are old classics, but no one really knows, you know, who wrote them. And no one really knows these stories because they just weren't that popular. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to have 4 stories of that. And then we're going to go into a segment of a modern day creepypasta. There's this really interesting Ed and Eddie creepypasta that, you know, I just love this last episode stories. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to have one bonus story that's just a random story from the internet that I think you'll enjoy. It's one of those stories that's just, it's what do they call them? A no sleep. You know what I mean? Yeah, so, yeah, that's our show. So yeah, we're going to listen to the first 2 stories. Then I'm going to come back and I'll see how you guys are doing. I'll look at the chat, although honestly, I'm probably not going to be looking at the chat that much this stream just because it distracts me so much. But yeah, so we're going to listen to the first 2 stories. I'll come back and talk, and then we'll listen to some more stories. I'll come back again, and it'll... yeah, so yeah, the first story is going to be about a weird carnival game that this guy describes, and the second story is going to be about a guy who finds a bunch of weird, creepy notes around his house. I don't think you're going to want to miss it. So without further ado, thank you all for stopping by tonight, and yeah, enjoy. I'll talk to you guys in just a few minutes. The Mouth of Truth. Author unknown. Somewhere near the center of Palermo in Sicily, there's an old amusement park. Should you wander around, just beside a shooting gallery, there's an old funny-looking statue of a grotesque face. Don't try to get close to it yet. As soon as you're about to touch it, no matter how hard you try, you'll change your mind. Go to the shooting gallery and pay the clerk for 3 games. It will cost you the equivalent of $10 in total. It doesn't matter how much you score. As soon as you finish the second game, keep the gun and don't shoot again. The clerk will ask you for his gun back, but you must ask to try the mouth of truth instead. After he agrees, you'll be able to approach the statue. Put your hand in its mouth up to your wrist. A small crowd will gather around you. After some seconds, the eyes will light, and your hand will be blocked. The statue will ask you one question about a secret or embarrassing fact of your life, even something you're ashamed of. You must answer the question truthfully and aloud, regardless of the people watching you. If you answer correctly, some will be shocked, others amused by the truth, and your hand will be released. Within the following 2 or 3 weeks, you will feel somewhat different. You will see that same light of the statue in your own eyes, and you'll notice people will feel a bit uneasy when talking to you. That will be for a simple reason. None will be able to lie to you. The effect of this blessing will last about a year. After it is worn out, you'll be able to redo this once again. Don't answer the statue with a lie. An inner mechanism will clamp your fingers and you'll pass out from the shock. When you wake up, you'll be just outside of the park and you won't be able to enter it ever again. When you go back home the morning afterwards, you'll feel something strange in the hand you put in the statue's mouth, and find out your pinky is missing. There will be no cuts or wounds, just smooth flesh where your finger used to be. Throughout the following days, you'll wake up each morning with one of your fingers gone. On the 11th to 20th morning, your toes will start to go missing. Should you try to ask for help, people will just laugh at you and say you've always been a liar. In a month, you'll have no appendages, no nose, ears, eyes, lips, genitals. All you'll be able to feel around with are your stumpy limbs. Then your limbs will disappear too. You'll be left wherever you fell asleep as a human stump until starvation and decay get the better of you. If you answer truthfully, but keep your voice low, from that moment on for the rest of your life, you'll be a big liar. Anytime you try to tell the truth, your voice will be cut, and only a slight hissing sound will come out. Notes. Author unknown. All this started when I found that little note. On a square piece of paper I found at the bottom of a box I was moving out of my basement. It read, "Hello? Please respond." I had no idea how long the paper had been there. Those boxes had sat in my basement since I moved in. I ignored it until the next morning, when I opened my coffee maker to throw out the grounds, and inside was a sopping wet piece of paper that read, Please respond. Please help. I figured it must have been put inside my coffee maker by whoever was pulling this pointless prank, because it wasn't there when I put my coffee grounds in. I found more notes under my mouse pad, inside my computer tower while I was putting in some new RAM, between the layers of tissue of my toilet paper roll, and under my DVD player's disc tray. Places that no one would ever look. Places you'd never think of putting a note. Places you knew no one would ever look, and it would be foolish to put a note. Because who knew when they would see it? But it kept happening. And they all said the same thing every time, begging me to respond and help them. Being the idiot I am, one day I just got fed up when I found one inside a cup in my dishwasher. Right after I had run it, the paper was dry. I wrote on the back of it, "Hello, I'm responding. Please explain your situation," and slid it under a crack in my bath-fitted tub. No sooner had I left my bathroom did I find another piece of paper floating on the surface tension of my glass of Sprite I had in the living room. I carefully picked it out of my drink. It read, "Thank you," and in large letters, "I'm trapped." I waved it around to dry it off a bit and wrote on the back of it again, "Where are you trapped? How are you sending me notes?" And, not creative enough to think of where to put it, I just threw it behind my couch. I waited and looked, but I didn't see any other note for the rest of the day. The next day, I checked my mail. Inside of some spam letter was the next note. "In the second dimension, below you." I wasted no time in responding with, "Whoever you are, this prank is idiotic. Give it a rest," and threw it outside. The wind blew it away. The next note I got was still in obnoxious capital letters, though it was much longer than before, and the last sentence seemed to have been squeezed into the remaining space. I think it was a passage from some encyclopedia or textbook. "The first dimension is a defined point in space. The second dimension," this was underlined, "is anything that exists with height and width, while the third adds length. The fourth includes time, and the fifth is the past. Time that has already occurred and is solidified in time-space." Everything beyond that was too squished in to read. I rolled my eyes and responded again. "How can you read this if you're in the second dimension? How can you even exist?" I slipped this note into the space in my toaster between the element and the metal casing. My reply came when I brushed it out of my hair the next morning before I took a shower. "Writing is 2D. Vision is 2D. Two 2D images superimposed." I didn't really get to the point of how I was supposed to rescue this person, which I defined in my next note that I flushed down the toilet. "Make me 3D," was all that was on the new slip of paper I found inside a chocolate bar I unwrapped later on. How the idiot was putting these inside sealed products was beyond me, but at this point I decided to play along. Maybe it was some kind of TV show thing. "How?" was all I wrote for my reply. I remember exactly where I put it because it was the last thing I wrote for a long time. I put it in a crack between my length mirror in its wooden backing. As soon as I let go, it slid out of sight and didn't see any papers again for a year and a half. Getting dressed one morning for work, I went into my room and adjusted my tie and shirt in my mirror. The same one, only it was now on the opposite side of my room. Looking into it, I noticed a square behind me on the wall. Turning around, there was none. In the instant before I turned around again, I thought it must have fallen off, but in the mirror, it was still there, still stuck to the wall. I touched the mirror, thinking maybe it was some sort of warping or optical illusion, but it wasn't. I lifted my heavy mirror up from the ground and slowly walked backwards with it, nearing myself to the opposite wall on which the paper was stuck. The closer I got, the clearer the message on it became, until I stopped, sandwiched between the heavy mirror and the wall, looking at the paper immediately over my shoulder. Make you 2D, it said. I moved the hell out of that house as soon as I could. After bunking at my girlfriend's for a while, I got rid of that mirror, the toaster, everything. My heart still skips a beat when I see any perfectly square piece of paper sitting on the floor, all alone. I still live in fear of someday I'll open up a book or look in the inner lining of a jacket and a piece of paper will flop out. I check all my things now, constantly. I also don't drink coffee anymore. Okay, dang, those were two pretty scary stories. Yeah, those are definitely old stories, but man, I don't even really remember reading them back in the day. But yeah, what'd you guys think? I really liked that carnival ride story a lot. I thought it was I thought it was really cool. But by the way, I wanted to let you guys know, because I kind of forgot to mention it at the beginning. Sorry, I've been running. If you want to watch this after the stream is over, it's gonna be live for people to watch on Patreon and my YouTube members. But if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not a patron and you're not a YouTube member, then I guess I decided to let this video stay live for everyone. But going forward, the stream will be live for everyone to watch Clancy Pasta tonight. Everyone can watch it live. But then afterwards, if you want to watch the full stream, YouTube member or patron, but then each individual narration that I do on here, each little story, I'm going to upload publicly over like the next week or whatever, on the Clancy Pasta YouTube channel and podcast for everyone to listen to. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah. We're gonna go into the two darker stories now. They're much darker than the first two. These are like the kinds of creepypasta stories you might find online in like 2015, 2016, like the pretty dark stuff, man. So buckle up and, okay, I'll talk to you guys when we get back. All right. The weird part of YouTube. Author unknown. Everyone has been to the weird part of YouTube. If you haven't, then I suggest you pay a visit. It's a very simple process. In fact, to make it even easier, I'll lay it out in step-by-step form. Step number 1. Find any video you want. Literally. Absolutely anything. It can be a cat video, a music video, whatever. Something from Japan will work best though. Step 2. Click on the strangest related video you can see, whichever has the absolute most mind-blowing thumbnail or title. Step 3. Repeat Step 2 until the most liked comment on the video is, quote, "I'm on that weird part of YouTube again," unquote, or something along those lines. Now, this alone isn't all that scary. It's mostly just funny. You can laugh at failed ads or absurd stuff from different cultures. Sometimes it gets scarier. A dancing girl with no arms or legs. Someone with a load of tattoos eating glass. A crazed hillbilly ranting about how the government will kill everyone. It gets stranger too. Dig deep enough and you can find actual death. I don't mean like news stories on people getting killed. I mean full-on amateur snuff films. No After Effects or CGI, just real people being murdered. You're wondering why YouTube doesn't take them down, aren't you? Well, there are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, there are days worth of videos being uploaded to the site every minute, so much that a lot gets by YouTube staff. They take down anything pornographic that isn't art, but even that slips through sometimes. The second reason is money. YouTube only pays attention to the stuff that pays, is protected by copyright, or gets a large amount of views in a short amount of time. That last one is the reason for the 301 views phenomenon. Because of this, there are plenty of people who can easily upload almost unnoticed videos. Some of them never get any real attention, only 2 or 3 views. There are a ton of these amateur snuff films, and they only require a little searching for. Try it for a few hours. Be warned, however, you might not hate what you see. You might want to see more. Or you might just want to try making one of these videos. After all, they have to come from somewhere. Venting download. Author unknown. I remember the early days of YouTube. Those were the good old days. I am a true gamer, and I was into web shows on YouTube that revolved around video games. One of my favorites was a series called Remember This Game? About obscure games, narrated by YouTube user Jif Kildtron, who unfortunately deleted his channel. In October, he made an episode revolving around a banned computer game called Venting. The game featured a lot of disturbing content and has since been banned. I thought the story made for a good creepypasta article without actually being one. While I can't bring you the original video, I can give you a transcript. Remember This Game? Episode 14, the Halloween special. Theme song plays. Remember this game? Venting? Hello. This is your video game wizard here once again. Back in 2004, I was really into downloadable online games. There were many to pick from. Some I remember, some I don't. One that I will never forget is Venting. At first, I never played it. The website I downloaded it from was very generic and didn't give off the sense of a fun game. Then a friend of mine who had played the game told me not to play it, and that it was the most frightening game he's ever played. I became curious and decided to download the game, despite my friend's advice. Apparently, it came with backgrounds you could put on your computer. I'll get into that in a few minutes. Poor quality footage from the game begins to play. It turned out to be a first-person shooter. There were a lot of fun ones back in those days. The gameplay itself was not all that fun and extremely generic. It didn't look like the developers put much effort into the game. It consisted of 12 levels, and all of them were basically the same level design. The environment was non-existent. The ground was in a 360-degree flat landscape with no textures. The sky was a light yellowish gray. The enemies were non-threatening and didn't do anything. They just stood there without any movement whatsoever, with the exception of occasional head turns. They were all the same 3D character model, just copied and pasted into the level. Each level had a different 3D model, and you were supposed to shoot them. Compared to modern violent games like San Andreas and Resident Evil 4, the game wasn't as graphic, but it lacked any of the multiple objectives like in those games. You shoot the characters and they just fall down as a little blood squirt, and the only objective to the whole game is to shoot people and nothing else. The sound in the game was also close to being non-existent. The only sound in the whole game is the song Für Elise being played on a synthesizer over and over again. I was about to stop playing the game after the first level, but then I realized the whole point of it was to kill a certain number of people. After killing all the copy and paste characters in the first level, you would be given a free computer background. A screen came up that read, "You killed 57 people. Click here for your free background." I clicked the button for the background and was horrified to see what it was. A photo of a dead teenage boy laying in a grass field near a park bench. His body had 4 bullet holes in it. The creepy thing was that the boy looked like the character model in the first level. The character model for the second level was an older bald man. After beating the level, you are given another background. This time it was a photo of a dead bald man who looks like the character model in the second level. He also appeared to have bullet holes in him. His body was lying in a swimming pool. I wanted to stop, but it felt like something was making me continue. I felt like I was uncovering some kind of murder mystery. After beating all 12 levels, I was introduced with the only cutscene in the whole game. We see the landscape of dead bodies. Then we finally see the character you play as. It is revealed to be a stark white humanoid with no detail, not even facial features. After shooting all these people, it points the gun at its face and pulls the trigger. When its body drops to the ground, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of someone crying as text reading "Game over" appears on the screen. The sound of the crying plays. I don't know why, but I saved the photos of the dead bodies. I gave them to my local police department. It turns out the game was developed by Jonathan Winstone Banks, a self-loathing college game designer from North Carolina. The following day, after putting the game on the internet, he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He left behind a note where he confessed to the deaths of 18 people, 12 of which were the people in the photos. The website I downloaded the game from was deleted a week after reporting the photos to the police. The strange thing is that none of the people he killed were identified. I know I shouldn't do this, but disregarding the whole backstory, this game was the worst thing I have ever played. No competition, no gameplay, no nothing. The only two reasons to play this game were for the whole backstory and to get a feeling of what it's like to see through the eyes of a psychopath. I won't give a rating. Knowing about the game, I can't give one. Anyway, that is the whole story. Hoped it was informative. Halloween is a few days away. I hope you have a good one. This is your video game wizard, signing off. Okay, how'd you guys like those two stories? Yeah, I thought they were pretty good, pretty scary. So yeah, coming up, we got a modern, like, lost episode story, like Ed and Eddie, about Ed and Eddie. I like the Ed boys. And then we got just like a no sleep story, you know? Just one of those stories that you find on no sleep. Okay, okay, I'll talk to you afterwards. Ed, and Eddie, The Joyride. Written by Eric Shamrick. Ed, and Eddie is a show I go way back with. I watched it all the time back when it aired and loved its over-the-top slapstick comedy. One day, my friend Jeff and I were re-watching one of the old episodes when he brought out a DVD case. It was completely black except for the cartoon logo scribbled on the front. It looked like a hand-drawn sketch of the Ed, and Eddie one. I asked him what it was and he told me it was a lost episode for the show. This made me pause since it was common knowledge that lost episodes weren't just something you could get on DVD. They were either incomplete material that never aired or kept under lock and key by the producers. Jeff assured me that his copy was the real thing. He apparently got it from this comic shop called Marquis Noir. This immediately set off red flags for me. Marquis Noir was known here in Toronto as a shop of wonders for archivists. It had the most obscure and rare media ever known, some of which dates back several decades. I read blogs about people's experiences with the shop, and most of them ended in ruin. They all talked about how the shop was cursed, and how they almost died because of the things they saw. I wasn't sure if I believed all that, but it was clear that place was bad news. I tried telling this to Jeff, but he wouldn't listen. He was adamant that we had to watch this disc since we were both big fans of the show. As sketchy as the whole thing was, I had to admit that I was still interested in what the disc held. We went to my living room so I could watch it on my big screen. The lights were turned off, and a bowl of popcorn was prepared to set the mood. Fear and excitement were coursing through my body. All those urban legends about Marquis Noir were chilling, but the possibility of having an actual lost episode in my grasp was too amazing to ignore. Jeff inserted the disc into the DVD player, and we watched the screen come to life. The intro played like normal except for a few weird static glitches that appeared every now and then. The episode title card would later pop up, showing a cartoon sketch of a destroyed car with the words, "Highway to Ed," hovering over it. The episode began with a scene of Eddie trying to break into a car. Double D was frantically telling him to stop, while Ed just watched on with a wide grin. Eddie eventually broke into the car by using a screwdriver and dived inside. Not wanting to leave Eddie to his own devices, Double D joined him inside the car, and so did Ed. I was wondering how someone as short as Eddie was supposed to drive a car when the next scene answered my question. Eddie glued some phone books to his feet and sat on a crate he pulled from thin air. The absurdity of it got a good laugh from my friend and I. Eddie sped off in the red car, despite Double D's protests. Eddie went joyriding all over the cul-de-sac. His control of the car was obviously sloppy, and he was constantly on the verge of running into someone's property. Double D was desperately pleading for Eddie to stop, but he didn't care. He wanted to show off his latest heist, regardless of who or what was in his way. The scene then cut to Kevin, who was doing bike tricks in front of all the other kids. They all cheered Kevin on as he performed stunt after stunt. Naz walked up to Kevin to comment on how cool his new bike was. This made Kevin blush a bit, but he played it cool and acted like it was no big deal. "Watch out!" I heard Sarah yell before the scene switched to Eddie's car quickly approaching the group. Kevin tried running out of there, like everyone else, but the wheels on his bike jammed up and froze him in place. I was fully expecting the show's usual slapstick shenanigans to happen at this point. Maybe Kevin would have been flattened like a pancake or be sent flying through the air until he was only a twinkle in the sky. What I got instead was something far more grim. A loud glitch effect briefly flashed on the screen, before switching to the direct aftermath of the crash. Kevin's body was a horribly mangled mess of his former self. His legs twisted in unnatural angles while blood pooled beneath him. The screen cut to the kid's face scrunched up in pure terror. Blood-curdling screams flared from the speakers, rattling me to the bone. Eddie continued driving his car while the mournful screams of the children roared in the background. The Ed trio were all nervous wrecks at this point. Ed was sobbing while Double D went on a long tirade about how Eddie was now a vicious criminal. This only infuriated Eddie and made him tell them to shut the hell up. His fearful eyes darted around while still driving at high speeds. Sweat beaded profusely from his head, and his heart was literally beating against his chest. Blood trickled from the hood of the car as Eddie drove into the highway. Police sirens flared vividly through the speakers, but there were no cops on screen. Eddie accelerated the car at even higher speeds, despite his friends begging him to stop with tears in their eyes. He was completely taken over by paranoia and anxiety. The car raced across the asphalt like a speeding bullet. Eddie's recklessness eventually caught up with him. His car went spiraling out of control until it crashed into the guardrail. All became silent. No music, no sound effects. The screen only showed an image of the wrecked car with a reddened windshield. The car remained motionless for several seconds, until the screen slowly faded to black. We didn't say anything for a while, even after the episode ended. I struggled to process just what the hell we just saw. I at first thought it was some fan animation, but the fluidity of the animation and perfect replication of the show's art style and sound design was something only a pro could pull off. Would Danny Antonucci or his employees really create an episode so morbid? I tried putting the experience behind me and going on about my life, but images of that episode kept playing in my head. One morning, before going out on a jog, a news report caught my eye. A group of 3 teens were found dead in a horrific crash after stealing a car from their neighborhood. There's been a weird uptick of teens stealing cars lately, so it was probably just a coincidence. But I still can't help but feel that it's somehow connected. My usual bus wouldn't let me exit last night. By Post Box 446. Basically what the title says. I live in a really big city in Germany, but more on the outskirts of town, since housing is cheaper there and my parents were actually able to afford a house that came with a big garden. Most apartments uptown are really expensive, and me and my sister would have had to share a room, so I'm pretty happy with how things are. The only disadvantage is the way of getting around and to school. We have 1 tram and 1 bus line. If I want to get to school, it takes me 40 minutes. Nerves of steel, since you can't rely on German trains, and I have to change trains several times. My school, as well as most of my friends, are right in the city center. On my way to school, one of the trains crosses a bridge over the river, and sometimes I use those 2 minutes that I can see over the city to switch between looking back at where I live and looking out front, where the train is going, to visualize the distance. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that when I visit my friends in winter, I take the bike in summer, though it takes almost a full hour, to avoid the pressing heat of German trains that mostly come without a functioning AC, and I'm taking the multiple trains and buses back home at the end of the evening. I'm often the sole passenger. Very rarely, I'm joined by a few familiar faces. At some point you recognize those living in the area, since it's basically like living in a village with the forest on one side and the river on the other, the latter sectioning us from most of the rest of the city, who work in the city and get back home late at night. Usually that's the case with the tram. The buses are mostly empty, since they take longer, and most people prefer the train over the swaying drive through narrow streets, with a stop coming up every few hundred meters. I prefer the bus though, since I have to walk quite a bit from the tram station back to my house, which, as a girl walking at night, isn't my preferred option whatsoever. It has happened before that I got back home from friends and was greeted by drunken men sitting on the pavement, drinking beer, and calling me over. So no thanks. The bus stops twice, at the beginning and the end of my street. With my house being right in the middle of the street, it's the better option for me. If it's late and I'm drowsy, I can even miss my stop and get out the next one, and I have to walk the same distance. It's currently the end of January, and the sun usually sets around 4 to 5 p.m. My curfew around this time of year is 10 p.m. Me and my friend group had spent the afternoon together, sitting around the table and yapping at each other when I realized the time, around 9:20. Knowing I'd be late, I called my dad to inform him. He wasn't particularly happy and offered to come pick me up, but I declined, knowing he takes his sleep very religiously. I told him I'd be fine and reminded him of the karate classes I had when I was 11, which didn't calm him down, but the idea of having to get out of bed and drive 20 minutes to come pick up his useless teenage daughter didn't seem to amaze him either, so he reluctantly agreed to let me take public transport alone. I'm always the first one to leave meetups, so I took advantage of being late anyways and took extra long to get my stuff. I left my friend's apartment at around 9:50. After punching through the stuffed metro, it was a Friday as well, so people were using their Fiera Bend to go knock themselves out in some club with friends and coworkers, and squeezing myself in an overflowing train which basically spit me onto the train station as I got out again. The cold air of January was a welcomed gift. I was now left between taking the tram back home or the bus. The bus would have arrived 5 minutes later than the tram, but I needed to cool down anyway, and the option of walking the kilometer from the tram station to my house came with the possibility of coming across a few drunks leaving the local pub. So I sat down at the bus station and watched a tram coming from my quarter of town, driving by in the direction of the city, packed with people looking for a fun night out. When it arrived, I was one of 3 people sitting down inside the warm and stuffy bus. I haven't been inside many buses outside of Germany, so I don't know if the smell inside is universal, so I'm going to describe it. It smells a bit as if hot gasoline spilled onto plastic, and the fumes had creeped into the soft cover of the seats. It smells of sweaty armpits, even in winter, dead skin, old people, and old cars. It smells warm and suffocating, and if you get carsick easily, then the smell is guaranteed to be a catalyst. Luckily, I'm used to it by now, and after noting it shortly, I'm able to ignore the smell of generations of sweaty passengers blazing under the summer heat and the rolling tuna can, sweat dripping on the cushions, being rubbed in by the next sweaty passenger's sweaty ass. I swear to God, some people have never even entered the aisle in the store where they sell deodorant. I looked for the least disgusting seat. Sometimes you never know what those dark stains actually are, and I'm convinced the seats are only patterned as some sort of camouflage for all the dirt, and sat down at the window. With YouTube blasting through my headphones and the street lamps passing by in a blur, I did the thing where you pretend to be in a movie. After around 20 minutes of possibly the most boring film scene ever, I pressed the stop button, and a jingle calling through the bus let the driver know that the next stop was mine. By then, I was the only passenger left inside the bus. Sometimes I wonder if, at some point in the future, they will discontinue the bus line, since it seems like a waste of fuel. As I imagine what it would be like driving the bus, chauffeuring around empty seats and possibly a jacket left behind late at night, I noticed that we weren't slowing down, even though my stop was coming up at the end of the street. Wondering if I'd hallucinated pressing the button, I pressed again. This time I was left without a jingle. After aggressively pressing several times, I got up to try another button. After reaching the 3rd button and pressing it down hard, the bus took the corner into my street at full speed, and I grabbed the edge of the seat, barely avoiding crashing into another. My arm hurt at the sudden pull of my whole body weight. Helpless, I stood in the middle of the bus, pressing the stupid buttons over and over. You're probably asking yourself why my first cause of action wasn't to go up to the front and talk to the driver, and obviously the thought had already crossed my mind. But you see, one of my biggest fears is talking to strangers. I avoid it any time I can, especially when I need to ask for help. I wasn't able to go to the store alone until I was around 14 or 15, because I was scared of talking to the cashier. I'd always take my younger sister with me, who used to get angry with me for being so socially incompetent. I can't talk to teachers properly, I've never made a friend because I went up to them, but instead I got adopted by all the friend groups I've ever been a part of. Asking the bus driver to stop would basically mean correcting him or telling him he'd done a mistake, and everything inside me turned inside out at the thought of an old grumpy man shouting at me because I told him how to do his job. I know that sounds stupid, but that's just the way my brain works, and I can't help it. But eventually, I realized that it would be my only option. Maybe the driver hadn't seen me because we were separated by his driver's cabin. Maybe he turned off the systems because he thought the bus might be empty. Admittedly, that just sounds stupid, but what else was supposed to have happened? While I still stood in the bus aisle, trying to gather up the courage to walk up front and talk to the driver, I felt the bus hit a familiarly shaky part of the road. I looked out of the dirty window just as we passed my house. I recognized it, although it was dark outside, and almost all the lights were turned off. My sister's window faces the street, and her pink curtains glowed in the dark. She probably still sat over one of her art projects. That short moment of seeing the peace and comfort of my home gave me enough courage to walk up front, grabbing support bars left and right as the bus rumbled over the neglected street covered in holes, where me and my sister used to put little paper boats in when it rained, and they turned into small oceans. I planned out my words. Sorry, sir. Excuse me. I need to get... I said to the empty chair. I stopped, dead in my tracks, both hands holding on to something on each side to not fall and break my neck. What the... The steering wheel was turning seemingly at random, all on its own. The bus was going straight, but the wheel had a slight drift to the left, which didn't seem to bother the rest of the vehicle. Dumbfounded, I stared at it, as it took a sharp turn to the right, but the bus went on, as always. Down the street, I could see the next stop approaching. Hello? I called out, not sure how to proceed. I don't know if I expected the driver to suddenly reappear again, or what I was trying to accomplish, but obviously, nothing happened. I stared at the dimly glowing green numbers next to the steering wheel, telling the time, 10:46 p.m. Suddenly, there was something right at my neck, hovering just over my skin. It was the primal instinct of being watched. My shoulders tensed, and even though it was fairly warm in the bus, a shiver ran over my whole body down to my feet. Too scared to move, I slightly tilted my head to look at the surveillance camera on the ceiling. I could almost feel it looking back. As the bus rushed past the next stop and its warmly lit bus shelter, I was thrown out of my stupor. Not looking behind me, I rushed to the driver's seat and grabbed the wheel. Or at least tried to. But no matter how many times I tried, my hands wouldn't reach it. It was like trying to walk up to a rainbow, where it moves away with every step. It was definitely there, but I just couldn't reach it. My mouth fell open to catch a breath. I tasted it before I smelled it. I tasted dead skin cells and gasoline and years' worth of sweat and plastic, and the air was so warm that it almost seemed as if I was breathing in an animal. I immediately closed my mouth as the smell intensified, but the taste lingered on my tongue and made it feel hairy. I tried covering my nose while still trying to reach for the steering wheel, my feet helplessly searching the brakes but only finding air, and as the bus took the next corner, I slid out of the driver's seat and crashed onto the floor, my hands meeting with the wet dirt of shoes brought in by late passengers, my only proof that there, in fact, had been people inside the bus prior. I didn't dare to turn around, still fearing something lunging at me if I did so. The adrenaline numbed my muscles, and I didn't notice the pain in my arm anymore that I had tugged moments earlier. My head spun as I got up. Nothing seemed clear anymore. The walls were caving in, but miles away. I couldn't reach for the seats, and the old streets under the wheels made standing difficult. I was thrown around, trying to keep my balance at the inside speed the bus was going now. How are we not hitting anything? How is it not hitting anything? How could I stop this nightmare? I caught a glimpse of the surveillance camera, and now I knew it was looking at me, but it was just sitting there as my vision blurred. Something started to drip. Maybe the windows. But it all just looked so wrong. Finally, I got hold of the edge of a seat. I was laying down on the floor inside the boiling dirt. The rigid smell of old gasoline entered my ears and nose and clouded my brain. I didn't move. There were sounds coming from the engine. It was screaming silently, but I didn't understand. My nails felt weird, as if there was something between them, and the bare flesh of my fingers and my bones seemed to distance themselves from me. I heaved myself up, my body at least 5 times as heavy as usual. I was driven by adrenaline, and I was at the end of the bus. No, at the front. No, underneath the seats. I was looking down at me, and I was looking out from behind my eyeballs. I fell forward and hit something. I heard a jingle, and then a door slowly opened. The icy wind hit my skin, cooling down the sweat and dirt as the bus carelessly rushed through the streets. With the inside of the bus being distorted, the outside looked as always. The dashboard bubbled up to my face, and the time display showed 10:62 p.m. Nothing that was possible. I was in a daze, almost unconscious, still trying to reach for the wheel. The bus screeched around a corner, and I hit the pavement. The adrenaline covered to the pain of the impact, and the backlights of the bus vanished in the distance. I sucked in breaths of cool air as the rancid smell of the bus seemed to drip out of my ears onto the concrete. I didn't even try to get up to the nearest bush as I rolled onto my side and let vomit spill out of my mouth. I didn't dare to move. I just lay there and waited until I regained feeling of my body. Then, after an ungodly amount of time, I dragged myself home. I still don't know how I got there, how I opened the front door and stumbled into my room. But I won't ever enter a bus again. Ever. Well, that was quite a first show. I think it went pretty well, Skeevy. How about you? Yeah. There were some bumps in the road, but all in all, I think it went pretty well. And I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you liked better. Did you like the Forgotten Tales? Did you like the modern Lost Episode creepypasta? Or did you like the No Sleep story? Hashtag no sleep, you know what I mean? Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, that's all that's on my notes. Well, thank you all for stopping by. We're going to be doing it again next week, so if you enjoyed listening to these stories live with me and hanging out for about an hour, come on by next week. We're going to do it again. We're going to hang out. And yeah, everyone in the chat say thanks to Skeevy. And yeah, we will talk to you. It all started with corn. Buy mayonnaise on a hot dog. And you're listening to Clancy Pasta. My name is Ryan. I was a 30-something-year-old failure of a man who was hardly holding himself together a couple of years before I'm writing this. I lived in a mess. A shitty little apartment with a bedroom, what you could call a living room, and a bathroom the size of an airplane one I inhabited. Didn't have a clear floor in years. I barely worked enough to live. I would regularly spend my free time drunk, and I hadn't eaten a vegetable in about 3 years, which made the next part especially weird. One morning I woke up and took my weekly shit, and saw something strange in my toilet. Corn. I thought it was strange because, as previously listed, I hadn't eaten a vegetable in years, let alone corn. I chalked it up to something I did while drunk. Maybe I just craved corn for some reason and decided to get some instead of going after my typical junk food. I moved on from that event, but I kept having corn in my stool. The next week there was corn in my stool, then a few days later corn again. It eventually got to a point where every couple of days I was having corn in my stool, and I was completely lost as to where it was coming from. After 2 months of constant corn, I eventually noticed something even stranger. I could see the floor of my room for the first time since I had moved in years ago. I must have started cleaning my room when I was drunk. There was still trash everywhere, but far less than there used to be. I guess I didn't question any of it because it wasn't a bad thing. I actually liked not having to trudge my way through heaps of fast food wrappers and boxes of old junk food, and I wasn't going to complain if drunk me wanted to renovate a little bit. But after that it got weirder. I would wake up after I went to sleep and my head wouldn't be burning from a hangover. I would notice myself having more bowel movements than I used to. My clothes were cleaned and folded, despite the fact that would have taken hours for drunk me to do. My room was mopped for God's sakes, and yet I still didn't question it at that point, despite the fact I didn't own a mop, let alone have any intentions of borrowing one. Despite all of that, I still didn't question it until I came home one day and saw that my bed was made. I couldn't have done it because I never made my bed. Drunk me couldn't have done it because he wasn't there, which only meant that somebody else was doing it. My first thought wasn't that somebody was breaking in, but rather that maybe my landlord was doing it, or maybe a concerned neighbor. But then I remembered somebody. I had an old friend from high school message me online about a month before all of this happened. He wanted to say hi to me and catch up. I wasn't exactly willing to, but he was probably the best man I ever knew, and I would feel bad leaving him on red. He was one of the few people who ever spoke to me and tried to befriend me. I kept to myself mostly, but he still tried to talk to me despite my lack of interesting conversation. I told him that if he wanted to hang out, he could come over in front of my apartment and we could talk for a bit. But he actually took it a step further and came inside and talked to my landlord who happened to be there at the time. Of course, he told him where my apartment was, because he had no sense of people's safety, and the thought that this person might be coming in to murder me or something, so needless to say, my old high school friend knocked on my front door and saw my horrid apartment. "Oh," he said to me, taken aback from the sight and smell of my living conditions. How have you been, man? He managed to stammer through after coming to terms with his shock. I am fine, I replied in embarrassment and shame. Do you want to go outside? We ended up not going back into my apartment. Instead, we went to the front of the complex and talked for a while. He asked me what I've been up to, which I replied with a simple, not much. He seemed to accept that answer without prying much further. I asked him how he had been in his life and been great, talking about how he had just gotten married, his job, his house, his lifestyle that was far better than mine. I don't want to say I was seething with jealousy, but I was definitely made more aware about how terrible my life was compared to his, and probably everyone else's. I always knew that my life was awful and that I needed a change, but I just never found the motivation to start. Once the garbage piled, I just let it continue to pile because it had been too difficult to clean up. He eventually told me straight up, "Dude, you live in a mess." I was taken aback by the blatant statement, but he continued, "You can't keep living like that. It's going to kill you." I don't remember what I said, but I think I made a remark about how it's easier said than done and some other stuff. But despite the fact I was probably an asshole about it, he simply offered me some help. "Look, man, if you ever need it, I can help you clean up your apartment and maybe the rest of your life. Just call me, I'll be happy to help." I was shocked at this point. "I have to go now, but if you need help, please don't hesitate to ask." I never did call him back, but since that has been happening, I figured maybe I should. Before I called him, I had to even practice what to say. I realized how ridiculous it sounded to ask a friend if he was breaking into my apartment every day to slowly clean up my shithole of an apartment while I was either drunk, sleeping, or at work. But I figured my landlord would be the type of guy to give him a spare key or something to help him get in. And he also knew I didn't have anything worth robbing. I finally called him and just asked him if he'd like to come by my apartment someday, to which he said he'd come by, but that it would be in a couple of months. I decided to set up some cameras in my house to see if I could catch anyone breaking in when I went to bed. I realized how ridiculous the idea that it could be my friend doing it was, and decided to see if maybe there was a squatter in my apartment or something who was taking care of me for some reason. When I checked the cameras the next day, I was terrified. This long, spindly creature came out of a shadow in the corner and moved around the ceilings like a spider and walked across the floor sideways like a crab. It looked emaciated, with what looked like a 5-foot-tall torso with ribs poking out at the very top. They looked like they could rip through at any second. It had a narrow head that was a dome with dents where the eyes should be, but simply with smooth skin over them. It reminded me of that squid at the bottom of the ocean with 20-foot-long arms. The way they both weren't meant to be seen by the human eye, but were both discovered in darkness. The disproportionately long arms, of which I'm sure there were at least 8, but more seemed to appear and disappear at random, started scooping up trash, taking it outside, and then coming back in. It did that for a couple of hours before coming back inside with a container of something and a large glass of what I assume was water, making its way to where I was drunkenly sleeping. It slowly reached an arm out to me, which bent at strange angles. I barely understood how it could possibly do without snapping, and pulled the covers over my body. leaving only my head exposed. It proceeded to pour the water down my throat and fed me several different types of food from the container, including strawberries, spinach, cucumber, and, of course, corn, before it went back to a corner in my room, where it disappeared. Now, I know what you're thinking now. I should have packed my bags then and there and never looked back. I know, logically, that was the correct choice, but I want you to look at it from my point of view. I was living a life that was the pinnacle of misery. I went to bed in a small apartment with nobody who cared for me, surrounded by filth, to a completely clean apartment and a decent diet. At this point, I had started taking care of myself too. I was bathing more regularly, not drinking as much, and even started cleaning up messes myself too. This was a good thing. This was truly improving my life, even if I didn't completely understand it. The creature even managed to get me a job interview for a place that paid way more. I have no idea how it sent the email, but it was further proof to me that it wanted to improve my life. My life was on the up and up. I got the job the creature landed me an interview for. I was more social, I was happier and healthier. I even started talking to a girl. If you were truly where I was and during this time period, you would have been happy about all of this too, despite the obvious strangeness of it all. It had become such a state of normalcy for me that at some point I sort of forgot about its existence. I stopped checking the cameras after a while because I knew what I would have seen, and honestly, I didn't care how my life was being improved. I was just happy to not be miserable for a change. At this point, I had completely forgotten about my friend coming over. When I heard a knock at my door, I was taken completely off guard by the sight of my old friend, who had a cleaning caddy with multiple sponges, 4 different types of cleaning spray for different surfaces, 2 cleaning brushes, 2 cans of Febreze, and a few other items. He was in shock at the sight of my apartment, which was completely spotless at this point, and almost dropped the caddy full of supplies before catching himself. We ended up talking for hours. Among the many things we talked about, I told him about my new job, the girl I'd been seeing, and my complete turnaround. In turn, he told me about his wife and what he did for work. He told me he moved around a lot for work and happened to be staying in the city where I lived last time I saw him, and happened to see me online and figured he'd pop in to see how I was doing at the time. He explained to me that when he saw my living conditions, he knew he couldn't just leave an old friend like that. When we finally finished talking, we hadn't realized how late it was. He told me he practically lived across the state and that it would be at least a 5-hour drive. I invited him to stay the night instead, to which he obliged and said he simply needed to call his wife to tell her he'd be back the next day, and would leave first thing in the morning. When he returned, I offered him my bed, to which he refused. I insisted that he should take the bed, and I would sleep on the old futon that I'm pretty sure came with the place. After I insisted I'd be a terrible guest if I didn't allow him to sleep in a comfortable bed, he finally relented. When I woke up the next morning to my friend gone, I didn't question it. When he didn't answer my text saying I enjoyed having him over, I figured he was a busy man and probably didn't have time to respond. When the police came to my door, I was more concerned. "Ryan Miller?" the officer asked with a mixture of concern and accusation in his voice. Yes, I responded nervously. "That's me." The man gave the inside of my apartment a look. "May I come in?" he asked. "You're not in trouble. We just need to speak with you." After I let the officer in, he explained everything. My friend had gone missing after he spent the night in my house. They said they knew I had nothing to do with his disappearance since they found his car hours away from my location, but still wanted to know if I knew anything about it since I was the last person to see him. I asked the officer what happened, to which he responded, "We found his car parked on the side of the road about 3 hours away from here, but he wasn't inside of it. After his wife reported him missing, we figured maybe you knew anything about why he disappeared, since you were the last person to see him." He continued, "Did he complain about anything? Did he bring up being unhappy about work or something like that?" I thought about it for a hard minute. During the hours we spent talking, he never seemed upset with his life. He had annoyances here and there, sure, but it's not like he suspected his wife was cheating on him or he thought his job was dead end. He had the same thoughts most people had about life. It was annoying, but at the end of the day, we're glad we're here. "No, nothing," I finally said. He didn't have any complaints that would have warranted him just disappearing. After a while, the officer left and I remained worried and confused. It took me 3 whole hours of worrying about what happened to my friend before I realized the cameras were still recording. I brought the footage back up from the night prior and watched the entire thing until I saw the creature pop out from the shadows, except it ignored me and headed straight for the bedroom. It moved too quickly for a creature of such proportions and fragility. When it made it to the bedroom, it simply stared, except it looked almost hungry. There was a strange saliva that seemed to come out of what I can only assume is its mouth, and it simply stared there for hours, until my friend, as promised, left first thing in the morning. I watched the creature lunge into the shadows right before my friend's alarm went off, and watched as my friend snuck by me out of the door to try not to wake me up. I watched in horror as the creature left outside of the window, which was on the same side of the building as my friend's car was parked. I don't know if the creature killed my friend or ate him or what, but the moment I saw that, I realized it was not safe to live there anymore. I realize now, I should have known that the moment I saw a demon in my living room picking up trash, but I figured I made the choice right in time. I didn't just leave the apartment complex. I moved states. I live on the opposite side of the country. I didn't even fully pack all my stuff before I left. I took what I picked fit into one briefcase. That was either somewhat valuable or would be annoying to replace, and left as fast as I could. I never gave the police that information because I knew it would be insane and nobody would believe me. So I simply got as far away from that thing as possible. Now, it's years later. I found a good job where I'm at right now. I live in an even nicer apartment too. The girl I was talking to didn't seem to understand what I was doing, which was also extremely difficult to explain, so we naturally stopped seeing each other. Other than that, my life is great. I kept some of the good habits too. I clean up after my messes, I stop drinking, I make sure no garbage ends up on my floors. I eat better. I even started going for daily walks to help me be healthier. All was going great. Except for one day, where I'd slept in and was going to be late for work. I rushed out the door as fast as I could, cutting as many corners in my daily routine as possible, which of course meant I couldn't have made my bed. But when I came home that day, exhausted after a long day of work, I saw something that made my heart drop to my stomach. My bed was made. Halo 3, Half Flood, the special gift. And you're listening to Clancy Pasta. I'm a Halo 3 glitcher. I've done all sorts of cool glitches, like boarding the Scarab on the Storm with the anti-air Wraith. You could call me a Halo scientist. And I discovered a glitch that allowed dead enemies and allies to resurrect as the Flood, but retain their original appearance. Since I'm one of those guys who likes to investigate this kind of thing, I tested it more thoroughly. I found that they could wield any weapon that was placed nearby their dead bodies, that they could jump like the Flood combat forms usually did, although these half-Flood didn't do it that often, that they could hijack vehicles, even that crazy backflip kick elites do on guys and prowler turrets. But if they wielded the sword or hammer, they could assassinate me. I could easily tell that these weren't ordinary Flood. I understood that they were transcendent species. Oh, and they could be assassinated. You know, melee at the back, instantly dead. But the problem I was finding was that they had poor health, even on Legendary, and that the elites didn't regain their shield, whereas elite Flood combat forms can regain their shield. But what really got me interested was an apparent message on their back after I had killed them. Have you ever stopped an infection form from infecting a dead body? Ever noticed the Flood traces on its back? That's exactly what I saw on these half-Flood. I like to call them bubbles. You might call them back herpes. Harmless and uninteresting nevertheless. They were all over the back and eventually disappeared. But as I gazed intently, I'd been doing so for several months, I noted the positioning, the sequence, and even the exact sizes of the bubbles. I eventually decided to step it up a notch. I found that they seemed to spell "Do it live." At first, I interpreted this to mean Xbox Live. But nothing happened when I was connected. Everything was the same. And then all of a sudden it came to my mind, the messages must have meant to do it on a living enemy or ally. Eerie. I was naive. I thought it was just an inside joke and Easter egg. I didn't find it creepy at all. So, I did some more testing. I started at exactly 12 a.m. midnight. I even got the strategy down. The strategy basically is, I trap a carrier form before going up the elevator to deactivate the third tower, release it after killing all my marine allies, get it to follow me, blow it up with a rocket launcher, get the resulting infection forms to follow me, and manipulate the enemy so that they get ambushed. And then I trigger a load point that removes all the Flood from the level. But this time, when I unleashed the half-Flood process on the local war chieftain, still alive at that time and also my first test subject, there was something completely different about him. First, his back was clean. No traces of Flood. Second, a headshot on him, despite having his headgear on, proved fatal. Third, killing him left an entirely different message on his back. Now try elite. Another weird message. I had recently developed a morbid interest in reading creepypasta, so this wasn't very surprising. I knew that it was all fake, but something inside kept telling me to heed it. I immediately realized that I had to do it on my elite allies while they were alive. But how could I get them there without them noticing the infection and shooting at it? So I kicked the warthog gunner out and drove off, but at a slow pace so the gunner could keep up. And when I came to the spot overlooking the brute encampment, the infection can only happen at this area, which I like to call the snow area since the ground is covered with snow. I noticed a quick texture change on the ground and sky. I shrugged it off as intentional. I had experienced something similar at this part of the level. But then the music, which had been repeatedly playing one of Bungie's oversight, died down, and the ambience began to sound like a blizzard. In fact, the snow began falling. Now this is very weird, as snowfall does not appear on the Covenant. But I dismissed this as a glitch. The game disc I was using was pre-owned. I got it from GameStop. And resumed. When I approached the brute, I was expecting a prowler to come careening into my screen, annoying the hell out of me by giving the chieftain more time to anticipate my approaching warthog. Instead, I got nothing. I got out of the warthog and walked a little further and saw the passengers and driver, total of 4, stacked neatly on top of each other where the prowler would usually spawn. Also, oddly, the chieftain and his brutes weren't even shooting at me, just standing there. It's probably that their AI was removed. But how and why? Who did it? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of unanswered things in Halo, like the toolbox inside an intangible building on Floodgate and a plasma rifle in a dark building on Savo Highway. So I was just thinking it could be because the game disc had defects or something. Or maybe I just failed to load the loading point that would imbue these enemies with AI. I decided to take a break to grab Coca-Cola and a Burger King takeout, so I paused the game and checked my clock. A lot of time had passed. At least 20 minutes, mind you. I thought it was peculiar because this glitch usually takes 5 minutes. After retrieving the food, I came back only to find that the pause menu was transparent, and the objectives were filled with stuff about half-flood. Was I scared? Yes. So I resumed. I had to do it. I couldn't let a little paranormal shit interfere with my job, and turned around and saw that the infection forms surprisingly had their AI. But they weren't moving normally. They looked kind of glitched, very erratic even. Have you ever seen a silverfish? Their movement is similar to a fish. That's what they looked like. Really, the infection forms looked like deformed popcorn, stretched and thin. I saw one pass through a rock and another through a small tree branch. I know that they are intangible to most things, but going past these kind of scenery? I suspected something was wrong, but I was very anxious to see what an elite would look like half-infected, alive. Their behavior intrigued me, because normally they would go for the dead brutes. I had killed 1 or 2 in preparation. Instead, they went straight for the hog. I immediately readied my plasma pistol. I looked at the elite in the passenger seat. He looked back and said one thing that scared the living shit out of me. And hey, it was 2:23 a.m. when I was doing this part. How does it feel to be dead? Wait, don't answer that. If I recall correctly, elites normally said that to enemies, or to players who gave them shitty weapons. Why me? There weren't any active enemies around. I know for a fact that AI don't shoot at inactive enemy AI. I drained his shield with the plasma pistol, got him out of the hog, and blew it up, to make sure the gunner didn't shoot at the infection forms, although I don't think it was needed as he was now frozen, looking at the infection form's face grimaced with horror. It was only after I went in theater mode that I saw his eyes. They were black and beady, like Halo 1 elites, although they looked black to the core. Then I kept the passenger elite busy by doing weapon exchange with him, shooting him with a plasma pistol bolt occasionally to stop the shield from recharging. And then when the infection forms got near, I immediately ran for that loading point. I got it, and then I heard the most fucking inhuman, blood-curdling scream possible. And the weird thing is, I didn't have the volume on. I even wear a Peltor earmuff to keep me concentrate on the game. All I know is that when I turned back, I saw the elite with his mouth really open, as if someone had grabbed his jaws and pulled them apart. I also saw this creepy smile, but I don't know if it was just me going crazy. But that's not the worst of it. He was frozen, but I could see his eyes moving, and I could see his tongue abnormally sticking out. Not to mention that it was moving erratically and really fast, like those anti-air wraith gunners and when heavy grunts throw plasma grenades. I zoomed in and holy fucking shit, it was the most detailed tongue I ever saw. I compared it to mine. That's right, I paused the game, ran to the bathroom, got a small mirror, and compared mine to the elites. It looked human. It didn't look elite at all. But did I stop? Of course not. I wasn't about to be beaten by a bunch of ghosts or whatever was manipulating my game. I am a ghost, for Christ's sake. Sliding ghost. I have researched Halo AI for months, so I unpaused it. I now regret doing it because the half-flood process had begun. The elite was writhing in pain, but I noticed some weird things coming out of his mouth. I zoomed in. Maggots! But that's not the scary part. His head started rotating rapidly, like those scary shit ghosts seen in the One Missed Call trailer. The American version. But then the animation suddenly changed. He was now looking normal, but he was clutching his head with both hands and walking aimlessly. I actually believed it was in-game animation. And then he dropped, dead, and got up. There were no visible signs of flood on him. The weapons I had given him, the sword and fuel rod gun, were clutched in both of his hands rather than the sword on his side and fuel rod gun on his back. He then turned to face me, saying the usual things he says to an ally, but in a distorted and gruffy voice. Then he started walking towards me. Was I scared at this point? No. Like I mentioned before, I had read a lot of creepypasta. I wasn't going to be scared by a thing that couldn't really hurt me. Suddenly, he leapt at me and killed me with one hit of his sword. This was on Legendary, and I'd used a modding program to give me invulnerability. At this point, I knew that something was wrong. First, sound playing, even though the volume is at 0. Now, a one-hit kill by a minor NPC? In Halo 3, the Arbiter, Johnson, Guilty Spark, Keys, they can all kill you with one shot if you turn traitor. Not even invincibility can help. Then what? I shouldn't have asked. When the game had reverted, I was facing away from the brute encampment. I thought it was over and this was like one of those legendary Pokemon encounters. But then I realized I was at the exact same spot where I turned around. The game had somehow given me a checkpoint. I turned around again out of curiosity to see if it would play out the same again, and what do I find? The half-flood elite is now holding the hammer. Believe it or not, I gave this elite 4 weapons. In Halo 3, they can carry up to 4 of them. It's a very simple strategy. But the wrong way, so that the sharp edge is facing me. In one hand, by the way. His sword was in his other hand, but it gave off a sickly red glow. Looking into it made my stomach churn, and I zoomed in and realized it wasn't glow. It was blood. The blood didn't just stream, it moved like waves. Like Lekgolo worms. I brought myself to zoom out, and the monstrosity was right in front of me. Its eyes were gray, its armor was covered in blood, which enhanced the elite major's armor's color, making it more crimson, and its feet were showing signs of decay. I immediately jumped back, charged a plasma pistol, and shot it at him. For some reason, its speed was severely reduced. The elite swung his hammer into the ground and ripped it open, and smoke immediately poured out, obscuring my view, making it difficult for me to tell if the shot landed. I could see a silhouette, so I aimed carefully and threw a plasma grenade. I could hear the stick around. I could hear the explosion. The smoke started clearing away. The elite was still standing, still alive. I spammed plasma pistol bolts at him, only to notice the recharging animation occur several times. The same amount of times that I had shot him. I could tell that the elite was invincible. What does a guy do in a horror movie when the killer's invincible? He runs. For a car, a means of escape, and that's what I did. I ran back to the Journey's End area. I looked to my motion sensor. That thing was following closely behind. To my glee, the Scorpion tank was still there, and it was operated by a Marine. I ran at full speed, and the Scorpion began shooting at the thing. I thought that I would be safe if I hopped aboard. Turns out that was a big mistake. The cannon didn't do any damage to the monster, and it merely used it to bolster his leaping height. Damn Marine AI. He landed on the tank, boarded it. I got out as soon as possible, but the Marine wasn't so lucky, as the elite destroyed the tank with the Marine within 3 seconds. Last I saw of the Marine, he had this horribly disfigured look on his face when he died. His eyes were blinking. His body was distorted in death. But the scariest part was when he said, "This, and this is after dying. Chief, why did you?" The face then distorts into an elite's face. "Why didn't you set me free earlier? I was waiting for you." I was shocked. I could feel my heartbeat like never before. It was going off the charts. I started running. I had no tank, no quick means of escape. Just me and my 2 legs and some weapons. Energy sword, battle rifle, magnum, and plasma pistol. But even with all these weapons, I didn't feel safe at all. I could hear the thing breathe, and I could feel its hot breath behind me, even though my motion sensor showed it some inches from me. I kept running. I didn't bother looking back, and then it hit me. I forgot that there was a mongoose right by the scorpion. I could easily outrun the thing if I got in that. I quickly turned around, crouch jumped over the thing's sword, and dropped grenades to delay it. When I saw the mongoose in sight, I was elated, gleeful, all sorts of happy emotion flooded my mind. I looked up again, and the mongoose was gone. Shit! My only chance to escape. I turned around and immediately started running, but then one of those in-game cutscene style animations started. My weapons disappeared. I could tell I was kneeling. I was forced to look down, and I saw that my energy shield was down, my armor punctured, my intestines gushing out, a huge puddle of blood, and I was forced to look at my left hand, then my right hand, which were covered in blood. All of this in the most stunning and realistic depiction I have ever seen. And then the camera went to the third person. The thing had stabbed with me with the hammer and sword, and slowly pulled both out, and I could just feel Chief screaming. I could feel it tingling in my veins, and it was literally ringing in my head. Suddenly, the pain disappeared as the game returned to the main menu. I recall seeing it give an unusual message, but I can't remember what it said. I looked around the room, but I was overwhelmed by dizziness, but I managed to catch the time. 9:30 a.m. I passed out. When I woke up, the time was 4:25 p.m. Was it a dream? I thought. Did I really experience that? The Xbox 360 turned off because I set it to last 6 hours before auto shut down. So I turned it back on and loaded up Halo 3. I went to theater, and I saw the recent films of game saves I did the other day. Thank God. I scrolled through it for reassurance and so I could save as many films as I could, being elated at the thought of it being a nightmare. But then... oh God, not again. No, it can't be. It can't fucking be. As I came to the bottom of the recent films. The Covenant on Legendary. NANNAN 2011 000000. And the date is listed as 11/22/2005. Happiness turned into terror as I selected it. I had to watch it again. I had to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I was overwhelmed by this sudden obsession. It coerced me. When it began, I immediately pushed the start button to see if the pause menu was transparent. It wasn't. I sighed, relieved that it seemed to be fixed. So I held down fast forward, brought up the pause menu for an automatic fast forward, dismissed it and watched. Nothing unusual. The Prowler was there. The brutes were active AI. The infection forms looked normal, but when it came to the part where I was going to the loading point, the film suddenly exited to the theater menu, and I got this message. Film cannot be retrieved. After that, all my attempts to load the film 100% failed. It stopped around 49%. I even checked the disc for scratches. It was in good condition, so I reinserted it. And then another message. Bungie Day themed, like on their website right now, popped up. Could it have been introduced when I installed that latest update for Xbox 360 that did nothing but pave the way for future updates? It said, "Dear player, we hope you enjoyed finding our most kick-ass secret. As a reward for your testing and dedication, take this exclusive elite armor as a token of our appreciation. Love, Bungie." The Bungie text was very difficult to discern, very blurry. It seems to actually say from blunder. Now, I've looked up the definition of what that word means. It means a careless mistake. If it's the latter, was it intentional? As if to warn me of something? Why me? There's plenty of modders out there that can do shitloads more than I could ever do. How come I experience this? I am now persuaded that it was something internal, not having to do with the disc. Then the armor customization screen popped up. A few days ago, I modded my gamer score so I could get commando armor and ascetic shoulders. I wondered what was new and what could beat those badass armor pieces. I looked in the helmet. Nothing. In the shoulders. Nothing. But there it was. In the body. 6 options. I slowly scrolled through and came across another combat armor. If I selected it, the helmet would change to combat and the armor color would change to red. But the helmet was unrecognizable. It was adorned with human skulls instead of crowns, and it looked like it was just fucking smiling at me. It and its skulls. The description reads, "Die to live, kill to love." I dared not go into multiplayer or Forge with it. I couldn't change it back after that, so I had to use a backup profile that I transferred to my computer a while ago to restore my armor. Was I terrified? You bet. I don't know what kind of sick, twisted psycho puts this shit into a 4-star game, but I know I'll never see Flood the same way again. They are not freaks. They are not monsters. They are not aliens. They are gods. Okay, now I'm really creeped out. I don't know why I said that last bit. I was thinking of something else. Maybe, just maybe, the game had a bigger impact than I imagined. Epilogue. These are film clips I captured on subsequent exploration. Normal half-flood elite with sword and hammer. It has not been edited at all. The ending was cut off all of a sudden when I was trying to record it. It showed the half-flood elite being splattered by a ghost. Notice the thing's docility and its obvious flood AI, inept for combat. This particular half-flood was vulnerable to grenade sticks, which don't kill perfect half-floods. And before anyone suggests, kill it with fire, as you can see, it doesn't work. not even on an imperfect half-flood. I never had the thing happen to me ever since the incident, but I know that I would rather die than see all the horrors revolving around that mysterious glitch. (7/25/2011) update. Here's a message in my email junk folder that I was planning on deleting, but at the insistence of my conscience, I'm releasing it to the public. The sender was unknown. Here's its content. Post this to the world. All 7 of them. To the 7. Hurry. I've got no time. But maybe you still do. Followed by a string of random letters and numbers. In the picture that was attached to it, missing image, hfe.png. Caption: the only known picture of the evil half-flood elite. Looks like 2 Marines fighting the half-flood. What did the sender mean by all this? How did he obtain a copy of the picture? Wait. Could this mean that other people received the special gift? I work at a funeral home, and a body keeps showing up in the wrong drawer. By Aaron is Not Funny, and you're listening to Clancy Pasta. I've been keeping track of the strange things that happen at the funeral home. Mostly because I realized a few months into the job that if I didn't start writing them down, I would either forget the details or convince myself that none of it had actually happened. I told myself that this would help, that writing the occurrences down would make sense of them, or at least allow me to sleep at night, but the truth is that writing only seems to remind me of how little I actually understand this place. Last week, something happened that unsettled me more than anything I've experienced so far, and I know I need to share it before I lose track of the details. This one started last week with a body that was, in every possible way, completely ordinary. The body arrived late in the evening, unremarkable in every way. Normal age, ordinary cause of death, regular paperwork. Nothing about him stood out to me when we moved him onto the operating table, except for the way that his arm shifted slightly when we adjusted the sheet, which I told myself was just residual movement, the kind you read about in training but don't really expect to see. Martin didn't comment on it, so I didn't either. We tagged him, logged him, and placed him in the refrigeration unit like we always do. The same one we've used since I started here, sliding the drawer closed into the seal caught with that familiar, slightly hollow sound that echoes more than it should in a room that small. I remember checking the label twice before I left. Not because anything seemed wrong, but because I had gotten into the habit of double-checking things after what happened with Daniel Crow. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual, hardly out of habit and hardly because sleep has become a little more difficult since I started working here. After unlocking the front door and setting my things down in the office, I made my way back to the preparation room with the vague intention of getting a head start on the day's work before anyone else came in. The drawer was closed. That was the first thing I noticed. And for a moment it felt reassuring because it meant whatever I had expected to find, though I couldn't have said exactly what that was, hadn't happened. Then I opened it. It was empty. I froze, staring at the other drawers, my mind racing for a rational explanation. Maybe a janitor's mistake, Martin moving it temporarily, or a misread label? I stood there for several seconds looking at where the body should have been, trying to fit what I was seeing into something that made sense. There are only so many explanations for something like that, and all of them rely on the assumption that something ordinary has gone wrong in a way that can eventually be corrected. I checked the label again, even though I already knew it was the right drawer, and then I started opening the others. I went one by one, moving down the row more quickly than I probably should have, though I was still careful enough to make sure I wasn't overlooking something obvious in my haste. I found him 4 drawers over, positioned exactly as we had left him, sheet pulled up neatly, tag still in place. There was nothing to suggest anything had changed, except for the fact that he was no longer where he was supposed to be. I closed the drawer, paused, and then opened it again, just to confirm that I hadn't made a mistake. He remained where he was. When I told Martin, he listened without interrupting, his expression neutral in a way that I've come to recognize as intentional. When I finished explaining what I had found, he simply told me to write it down, as though that was the most practical and reasonable response to the situation. Time, drawer, anything else you notice? He said, already turning back to what he had been doing, which left me with the impression that this was not the first time something like this had happened, even if this was the first time I had been the one to notice it. The rest of the day was uneventful, and that night before I left, I checked the drawer again. I decided to let him stay in the drawer he was in when I came in that morning, but then, without really thinking about why, I marked the outside of the drawer. I pulled off a short piece of masking tape from the roll and stuck it over where the top of the drawer the body was, connected to the bottom edge of the drawer above it. That night, I went home with a small pit in my stomach, though I wasn't sure if I could explain exactly why. I knew that the body had freaked me out, but could I really convince myself, or anyone else, that the body had moved on its own during the night? I was one of the last ones to leave in the night, and I was the first to get there in the morning. Though any efforts I had put into easing my worries in the night were immediately undone the following morning. When I came to work the next morning, I skipped out on my normal morning routine and went straight downstairs to storage. To my relief, the drawer was still closed, but on further inspection, any hope I was feeling that I had imagined the events of yesterday left as soon as they had come. The mark was broken. The tape wasn't torn, but it had clearly been moved. It looked like someone peeled the tape off of the drawer, opened it, closed it again, and tried to press the tape back down to where it was before. I could tell that the tape had been removed because it was slightly creased and had a tiny dog ear fold at the top corner. And when I put my face closer to the tape, really trying to remember if I had just done a bad job at taping it shut yesterday, I could swear I saw a fingerprint on the tape. I remember feeling something settle in my chest at that point. Not panic exactly, but a certainty that whatever was happening was not the result of a mistake I could correct by being more careful. I steeled myself with a nervous, shaky breath, and I opened the drawer. It was empty, but this time I didn't hesitate. I moved through the others until I found him again, farther down, and positioned slightly differently than before. One arm dangled at just enough of an angle that I was certain it hadn't been the night before. Over the next few days, I documented everything. Not just the drawer numbers and the times, but the order I checked them in, the placement of the tools on the cart, the way the condensation formed along the inside of the unit doors, even the faint variations in the sounds of the refrigeration unit inside of the unit doors. Because the more I paid attention, the more it felt like the movement wasn't random. On the fourth night, I stayed late. I told Martin I had paperwork to finish, which was partially true, but I mostly wanted to see if anything would happen when I was there. Up until this point, all of the changes had occurred overnight, in that stretch of time where no one was watching. The building felt different at night, quieter in a way that seemed heavier rather than empty, like the absence of sound was itself something that had settled into the walls and floors. And when I stepped into the preparation room, I had the distinct feeling that I was interrupting something, though I couldn't have said what. The drawer was closed when I approached it, the metal handle colder than usual beneath my fingers. For a moment, I found myself hesitating, aware that this no longer felt like a routine action, but something closer to a confirmation of what I already suspected I would find. When I finally pulled it open, he was there, positioned exactly where I left him. The sheet was still drawn neatly over him, the tag still in place, and nothing at all to suggest that anything had changed. That should have felt reassuring, though it wasn't, because by that point the absence of change felt just as deliberate as the movements had. I stood there longer than I meant to, watching, listening, aware of the low, steady vibration of the unit beneath my hand, and the way the room seemed to hold its silence in a way that felt almost expectant, like it was waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. Eventually, I closed the drawer again, pressing it firmly until I felt the seal catch, and turned toward the door, already reaching for the light switch. I had all intentions of leaving, because there is a point where staying any longer stops feeling like observation and starts feeling like participation. And I was not sure which side of that line I was standing on anymore. Then, with my hand hovering just a foot or two from the switch, the lights went out. For a brief moment, the room existed only in the dim spill of light from the hallway behind me, enough to outline the edges of the counters and the shape of the refrigeration unit against the wall. It was enough light to barely see, but not enough to fill in the details. And it was in that in-between space where nothing was fully visible, but nothing was entirely hidden either, that I heard it. It was not loud, and it was not sudden. It was a slow, deliberate sound, like the careful shifting of weight across a surface. That kind of sound does not belong to machinery or settling buildings, but to something that is choosing to move. I did not turn immediately. Instead, I stood there with my hand still held up near the light switch, aware of the way the silence around the room seemed to deepen. I held my breath, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up one by one. Finally, a chill ran up my spine, and I worked up all of the courage I had left. When I turned back towards the unit, The drawer was open. Not partially, not slightly misaligned in a way that could be explained later, but fully extended with the metal track visible beneath it. The interior exposed in a way that made it immediately clear that it had not been left that way by accident. For a moment, I thought it was empty again. Then I realized I was looking at it from the wrong angle. It had been moved forward. Not dramatically, but enough that the sheet rested closer to the edge than it had before, the fabric catching lightly on the lip of the drawer as though it had been pushed off in that direction rather than placed there. I did not step closer. I did not reach out. I simply stood where I was, aware of the distance between us in a way that felt significant, as though it was something that could change without warning. After a few seconds that felt longer than they should have, I took a step back. I jumped when I was met with a clanging sound that echoed in the small room. The drawer didn't jerk or slide abruptly, but moved outwards in a small movement that caused it to extend out fully and collide with the end of the track. It stopped moving as soon as I did, as I froze in the middle of my backward step, startled by the sudden sound. I felt something shift in my understanding then, because up until that moment, I had been treating the movement as something separate from me, something that occurred independently and could be observed from a distance. I stepped back again, slower this time. The drawer followed, clanging into the edge of the track again. It wasn't by the same distance, but it was enough to make it clear that the relationship between my movement and its own was not coincidental. I stopped. It stopped. The room felt smaller then. Not physically, but in a way that made the space between us seem less reliable than it had before. Like it could close without any warning if I wasn't careful. I do not remember deciding to leave for the night, only that at some point I was no longer in the room, the light still off behind me, and the door closing with more force than I intended, the sound of it settling into the wooden frame louder than it should have been in the quiet hallway. I stood there for a moment, listening, half expecting to hear something from the other side of the door. Maybe another shift, another movement, something that would confirm that it had not stopped simply because I wasn't looking at it anymore. There was nothing. The silence returned, steady and unbroken, as though the room had arrested itself the moment I stepped out of it. And the next morning, when I returned to work like I always do, the drawer was closed. I stood in front of it for longer than I should have, my hand resting lightly on the handle, aware of the faint vibration beneath my fingers and the way it felt like it went straight through to my bones. My hesitation had become more pronounced than it had even last night, some part of me already understanding that opening it was no longer just a matter of confirming what could have changed, but acknowledging that it would. When I did finally pull it open, it was empty. I did not check the others right away. Instead, I turned, already aware of where my attention was being drawn, and found him on the preparation table. He was positioned neatly, the sheet folded back just slightly enough to expose his face to the overhead light. There was something different about him then, something subtle enough that I might not have noticed if I hadn't already been looking for changes, because his head had shifted just enough that it was no longer angled up in that familiar neutral position. His head was turned slightly towards the door, toward the space where I stood. I remained where I was, aware of the distance between us, aware of the stillness of the room, and aware of the uncomfortable certainty that whatever had been happening over the past few days was no longer contained to a pattern that I could observe and record without consequence. I stepped back into the hallway and closed the door, leaving everything exactly as it was. I went home earlier than usual that day, taking the same route I always take through town. The sidewalks mostly empty, the fog still lingering in the spaces between buildings where the streetlights don't quite reach. And for a while, the walk felt no different than it ever had. The sound of my footsteps steady against the pavement, the quiet of the town settling in around me in that familiar, muted way. It wasn't until several minutes had passed that I became aware of a second rhythm beneath my own, faint enough that I could have dismissed it as an echo or a trick of the way sound carries in the fog, but consistent enough that I could not ignore it once I had noticed it. I slowed, not abruptly but gradually, paying closer attention to the spacing of my steps. I heard the way each one landed and lifted, and the sound behind me that adjusted with it. Not perfectly, not in a way that mirrored me exactly, but in a way that suggested awareness rather than a coincidence. When I came to a stop, the sound behind me did the same. Not immediately, but after a slight delay, as though whatever was making it needed an extra moment to register the change. I did not turn right away. Instead, I stood there listening, aware of the quiet pressing in on all sides, aware of how little there was to mask the sound if it chose to return. And when I finally looked back, there was nothing there. The sidewalk stretched empty behind me, the fog softening the edges of everything softly, until the distance became difficult to judge. For a moment, I considered the possibility that I had imagined it entirely, that the pattern I thought I had heard was nothing more than my own steps reflected back at me in a way I had misinterpreted. Then I started walking again, and after a few seconds, the second rhythm returned. Faint, measured, following. I have been writing it down even more consistently since then. Every detail, every change, every small inconsistency that refuses to settle into something I can explain, because it feels increasingly important that I keep track of where things are supposed to be, even if that understanding only lasts until the next time I look. But I have stopped trying to move him, and I have started paying attention to the spaces outside of the funeral home, because I can no longer ignore the possibility that whatever has been shifting inside that room might not be confined to it, and that the distance between where it is and where I am may not be as fixed as I once believed it to be. The You Woman of the Western Roads by Cosmic Orphan 2020. I don't claim to be much of a writer, but sharing this story of mine has been a long time coming. I used to be a lorry driver for a living, or if you're American, I used to be a trucker. For 14 years, I drove along the many motorways and through the busy cities of England. Well, more than a decade into the job, I finally had enough. Not of being a lorry driver per se, but being a lorry driver in England. The endless traffic and mind-crippling hours away from the wife just wasn't worth it anymore. Talking to the missus about this, she couldn't help but feel the same way, and so she suggested we finally look to moving abroad. Although living on a school teacher's and lorry driver's salary didn't leave us with many options, my wife then suggests we move to the neighboring Republic of Ireland. Having never been to the Emerald Isle myself, my wife reassured me that I'd love it there. After all, there's less cities, less people, and even less traffic. That's all well and good, love, but what would I do for work? I questioned her, more than skeptical to the idea. A lorry driver, love, she responds with quick condescension. Well, a year or so later, this idea of moving across the pond eventually became a reality. We had settled down in the southwest of Ireland in County Kerry, apparently considered by most to be the most beautiful part of the country. Having changed countries, but not professions, my wife taught children in the village, whereas I went back on the road, driving from Cork in the south, up along the west coast, and stopping just short of the northern Irish border. As much as I hated being a lorry driver in England, the same cannot be said here. The traffic along the country roads was almost inexistent, and having only small towns as my drop-off points, I was on the road for no more than a day or two at a time, which was handy, considering the missus and I were trying to start a family of our own. In all honesty, driving up and down the roads of the rugged west coast was more of a luxury than anything else. On one side of the road, I had the endless green hills and mountains of the countryside, and on the other, the breathtaking Atlantic coastway. If I had to say anything bad about the job, it would have to be driving the western country roads at night. It's hard enough as a lorry driver having to navigate these dark, narrow roads which bend one way then the other, but driving along them at night, something about it is very unsettling. If I had to put my finger on it, I'd say it has to do with something one of my colleagues said to me before my first haul. I won't give away his name, but I'll just call him Padraig. A seasoned lorry driver like myself, Padraig welcomed me to the company by giving me a stern but whimsical warning about driving the western counties at night. Be sure to keep your wits about you, Jamie boy. Things here aren't what they always seem to be. Keep your eyes on the road at all times, I tell you, and you'll be grand. A few months into the job, and things couldn't have been going better. Having just come home from a 2-day haul, my wife surprises me with the news that she was now pregnant with our first child. After a few days off to celebrate this news with my wife, I was now back on the road, happier than I ever had been before. Driving for 4 hours on this particular day, I was now somewhere in County Mayo, the northwest of the country. Although I pretty much love driving through every county on the western coast, County Mayo was a little too barren for my liking. Now driving at night, I was moving along a narrow country road in the middle of nowhere, where, outlining this road to each side, was a long stretch of stone wall, and considering the smell of manure now inside the cab with me, I presumed on the other side of these walls was either a cow or sheep field. Keeping in mind Padraig's words of warning, I made sure to keep my wits about me. Staring constantly at the stretch of road in front of me, guessing which way it would curve next in the headlights, I was now becoming surprisingly drowsy. With nothing else on my mind but the unborn child now growing inside my wife's womb, although my eyes never once left the road in front of me, my mind did somewhat wander elsewhere. This would turn out to be the biggest mistake of my life. because cruising down the road through the fog and heavy rain, my weary eyes became alert to a distant shape now apparent up ahead. Though hard to see through the fog and rain, the shape appears to belong to that of a person, walking rather sluggishly from one side of the road to the other. Hunched over like some old crone, this unknown person appears to be carrying a heavy object against their abdomen with some difficulty. By the time I process all this information, having already pulled the brakes, the lorry continues to screech along the wet cement, and to my distress, the person on the road does not move or duck out of the way until, feeling a vibrating thud inside the cab, the unknown person crashes into the front of the vehicle's unit, or, more precisely, the unit crashes into them. Bloody hell! I cry out reactively, the lorry having now screeched to a halt. Frozen in shock by the realization I've just ran over someone, I fail to get out of the vehicle. That should have been my first reaction, but quite honestly, I was afraid of how I would find them. Once I gain any kind of courage, I hesitantly lean over the counter to see even the slightest slither of the individual, and to my absolute horror, I see the individual on the road is a woman. Oh no. No, no, no. But the reason I knew instantly this was a woman was because whoever they were heavily pregnant. Jesus Christ, what have I done? I screamed inside the cab. Quickly climbing down onto the road, I moved instantly to the front of the headlights, praying internally this woman and her unborn child are still alive. But once I catch sight of the woman, exposed by the bright headlights shining off the road, I'm caught rather off guard, because for some reason this woman, she wasn't wearing any clothes. Unable to identify the woman by her face, as her swollen belly covers the upper half of her body, I move forward, again with hesitance towards her, averting my eyes until her face was now in sight. Thankfully, in the corner of my eye, I could see the limbs of the woman moving, which meant she was still alive. Now, what I'm about to say next is the whole unbelievable part of it. But I swear this is what I saw. When I come upon the woman's face, what I see isn't a woman at all. The head was not the head of a human being. It was the head of a ewe. A fucking sheep. Ah! What the... I believe were my exact words. Just as my reaction was when I hit this thing. I'm completely frozen with terror, having lost any feeling in my arms and legs. And although this creature, as best to call it, was moving ever so slightly, it was now stiff as a piece of roadkill. Unlike its eyes, which were black and motionless, its mouth was wide in a permanent, silent scream. I was afraid to stare at the rest of it, but my curiosity got the better of me. Its ewe's head, which ends at the loose, pale skin of its neck, was followed by the very human body, at least for the most part. Its skin was covered in a barely visible layer of white fur or wool. Its breasts were not like that of a human woman, were grotesquely similar to the teats of an ewe, a pale sort of veiny pink. But what's more, on the swollenness of its belly I see what must have been a pagan symbol of some kind, carved into the skin, presumably by a knife. The symbol was of 3 circular spirals, each connected in the middle. As I'm studying the spirals, wondering what the hell they mean, and who in God's name carved it there, the spirals begin to move. It was the stomach. Whatever it was inside, it was still alive. The way the thing was moving, almost trying to burst its way out, that was the final straw. Before anything more can happen, I leave the dead creature and the unborn thing inside it. I return to the cab, put the gear stick in reverse, and then I drive like hell out of there. Remembering I'm still on the clock, I continue driving up to Donegal before finishing my last drop-off point and turning home. Though I was in no state to continue driving that night, I just wanted to get home as soon as possible. But there was no way I was driving back down through County Mayo, and so I returned home driving much further inland than usual. I never told my wife what happened that night. God, I can only imagine how she would have reacted and her condition nonetheless. I just went on as normal until my next haul started. More than afraid to ever drive on those roads again, but with a job to do and a baby on the way, I didn't have much of a choice. Although I did make several more trips on those northwestern roads, I made sure never to be there under the cover of night. Thankfully, whatever it was I saw, I never saw again. Something keeps knocking on my bedroom door, and I live alone. By 907. I'm Hannah, 24. I live alone in a small apartment in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've always loved it. It's quiet here, but it always is for me. The kind of quiet that feels heavy. The kind that settles over everything when snow covers the world and muffles the air. I work retail, which isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives my week structure. Most days I ring up tourists who think Carhartt is a fashion statement, and locals who've been buying the same extra tough boots since the 80s. By the time I get home, I'm white. But it's my place. My little apartment with the creaky baseboards, the stubborn heater, and walls that hum when the wind gets bad. I wear hearing aids in both ears. I've had moderate hearing loss since I was a kid, and I've learned to adapt. Without them, the world softens. I can still feel sound as vibrations, but the details fade. It's comforting sometimes, but also isolating, especially when you live alone. Usually, I don't scare easily. When you grow up in Alaska, you get used to strange noises. Ice shifting, roofs dumping snow at 3 a.m., old pipes clanging like footsteps. But last week, something happened that's been eating at me ever since. It was a normal Tuesday night. I got home from work around 10, heated some leftover pasta, scrolled my phone, and played Stardew Valley before bed. My bedroom's right next to the front door, which is convenient for leaving in the morning, but not great when you're trying to forget you live alone. I shut my bedroom door out of habit, took out my hearing aids, and put them on the charger. Then I settled into bed with my laptop. The hum of the fan was comforting. My world was soft and still. Then I felt it before I heard it. 3 knocks. Not on the front door, on my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Old buildings do that, but then it came again. Deliberate, steady. Knock, knock, knock. My stomach dropped. If someone had come in, I wouldn't have heard them. If it had been the front door, I wouldn't have heard it. I scrambled for my phone and dialed 911, but without my hearing aids, I couldn't understand the operator. I tried to talk, hoping they could trace the call, but my hands were shaking too badly to type anything coherent. Then I felt another sound. A softer knock. This time from the bathroom door beside my bed. I froze. Every instinct told me not to move. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I don't remember hearing the police arrive, but they did. Flashlights swept under the door. One of them called my name. 2 officers came in, a young woman and an older man with a tired, gravelly voice that made everything sound like a question. They checked the apartment from top to bottom. No one was there. The doors were locked from the inside. No footprints in the snow. I told them about the knocks, how they came from the bedroom door first, then the bathroom door, how I wouldn't hear anyone enter because my hearing aids were out. The older cop gave me a sympathetic look. Apartments like this, sound bounces. Could have been upstairs or next door, he said, trying to smile. Old plumbing, wind, vents, it can sound like knocking, especially late at night. The younger cop didn't say much. She kept looking at the bathroom door. The mirror inside was still fogged up. She touched it, frowned, and asked if I'd taken a shower before they arrived. I told her no. I'd been in bed. She didn't write anything down after that. Before leaving, the older cop said, "Try keeping a light on. Sometimes being alone plays tricks on you." Then, almost as an afterthought, "If it happens again, call us. Maybe record it next time so we have something to go on." When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt heavier, like the silence itself was holding its breath. I locked everything twice and sat on the bed for over an hour, listening for pipes, wind, anything that could explain it. It's been a week now. Every night since, the knockings come back. Sometimes on the bedroom door, sometimes the bathroom. Once, I swear it came from the closet. I've been staying with a friend for a few nights and haven't gone to work. When I went back to grab clothes this morning, I noticed something strange. My hearing aids weren't on the charger. They were on the bathroom counter, perfectly lined up side by side. I know I didn't leave them there. And taped to the door was a note. It said, "I wait until you take them out, so you know I'm close." It's been almost 3 months since I left that apartment. Ending the lease early was expensive, but I couldn't stay. My friend's boyfriend came back from his trip, and I'd already overstayed my welcome. I switched jobs, sold most of my things, and bought new hearing aids. Different brand, different Bluetooth model. I even started seeing a therapist, though I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. I said I'd had a break-in and some residual anxiety. For a while, it worked. I started sleeping again. Until last week. It happened during my shift. I was restocking shelves, zoning out to a podcast through my new hearing aids, when the audio cut. Static hissed for a moment, then cleared. In the silence between words, I heard it. A whisper. You shouldn't be able to hear me. I yanked the aids out so fast they hit the floor. My coworker thought I was having a panic attack. I told her I got dizzy. That night, I plugged them into my laptop to run diagnostics, the app that syncs them as a log for sound input. Normally it just shows noise levels and Bluetooth activity, but this time there was a file under a recorded ambient. It was dated the day I moved out of my old apartment. I didn't even own this pair then. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. I clicked it. It started with static, then faint knocking, then my own voice, muffled, like I was half asleep, whispering to myself. I told myself it was just an old recording, a glitch. Still, I left every light in the apartment on that night. Ocean sounds played through my headphones, a thin wall of calm against the silence pressing in around me. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. Every light I'd left on was off, except the bathroom light to the right of my bed. It glowed faintly under the door, a dull strip of gold cutting across the floor. My pulse started racing. I stayed perfectly still, breathing through my nose, trying not to make a sound. Then I saw it, a shadow moving under the door. Slow, deliberate, like someone was standing there, shifting their weight. My throat went dry. I reached for my phone, but it had slipped between the mattress and the wall. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was so close it vibrated through the floorboards. I pressed a hand over my mouth as tears spilled down my face. Then I heard my own voice, not from the bathroom, from my headphones. Soft, measured, exactly how I sound. Can you hear me? Static crackled, then my voice again, closer this time. Can I come in? The bathroom doorknob rattled once, twice. My chest tightened. I lunged for my phone and pressed 911 with trembling fingers. The call connected, but I didn't dare speak. I could barely hear the operator's distant voice through the static. My hearing aids were still on the charger across the room. The knocking stopped, then a whisper slipped through the headphones. You don't have to let me in. You already did. My name's Henry. I'm Hannah's little brother. If you've read this far, then you've been reading her notes from her laptop. She's been missing for 3 years. No sign of a struggle, no forced entry, no trail. Just gone. Her car was still outside. Her wallet, phone, and laptop were inside. Her hearing aids were sitting side by side on the bathroom counter. After weeks of investigation, the report ruled it a voluntary disappearance during a mental health crisis. The police said she'd suffered a breakdown, likely triggered by sleep deprivation and isolation. They cited her therapist's notes in these entries as evidence of, quote, increasing paranoia and auditory hallucinations, unquote. How ironic. When the case went public, the whole town searched for her. Volunteers combed snow-covered woods, drained creeks, and posted flyers from Anchorage to Wasilla. For months, people left their porch lights on for her, so she could find her way back, someone wrote online. But no tracks were found. No CCTV footage. No trace after her phone pinged for the last time at 2:37 a.m. Eventually, my parents asked me to pack up her things. I found a flash drive taped under her desk drawer. On it were the files you just read. She titled the folder Sound Diary. I couldn't bring myself to open it for years. But this week, missing her more than ever, I charged her laptop and plugged the drive in. The last entry ends the night she wrote about hearing her voice again. After that, nothing. I tried playing the recording she mentioned, the one she said had her voice doubled. It's corrupted now. It starts with static, faint knocks and then splits into 2 overlapping tracks. You can hear 2 people breathing out of sync. Right before it cuts off, one voice says my name. Clear, calm. Her voice. Henry, don't let them in. Then the other voice, same tone, same breath, whispers back. He already did. I tell myself it's just feedback, just corruption. But every night since I plugged in that flash drive, I've been hearing faint knocks in my apartment. Always around 2:37 a.m. And last night, when I put my phone on the charger, it buzzed once. New Bluetooth device detected. Device name: Hannah's hearing aids. Read the rules before playing at this casino. By Zesty Close Rush, 1469. Welcome to Alegria Casino. And why that name? Because here, fun is not a detail, it is the rule. More than distributing prizes, we want to turn your most hidden desires into reality. Most traditional casinos are limited to roulettes, slots, and blackjack. If you expect this type of entertainment at our establishment, I'm sorry to inform you, we will not meet your expectations. At Alegria Casino, players don't just play, They create their own games and challenges, and our role is to ensure that each of these ideas becomes reality. This means that here you will find everything from simple challenges to experiences so intense that they border on impossible. To give you an idea, one of our most famous games promises to turn any player into a billionaire without having to invest even $100. Sounds pretty good, right? But there is one detail. To win, the participant will have to endure a pan of boiling oil on their open stomach and remain conscious for 5 minutes. If you manage to survive this challenge, congratulations! The fortune will be yours, guaranteeing your family's financial security for generations. Why do we do this? Excellent question. Our administrators know very well the limits, or rather the absence of them, in their human nature. They understand that every individual carries a dark side, ready to emerge when they find the right environment. And here, we provide exactly that trigger. We ask that you not worry about judgment. At our prestigious institution, we welcome clients of all profiles. However, to be here, players must follow a series of regulations and make an initial deposit of approximately $100,000 to secure their Level 1 card, the first of 5 levels we offer. Each level features different types of bets and players, including influential politicians and celebrities who frequent the upper floors. Are you excited? Review your concepts. There are some of the worst human beings you can imagine. My advice to you: don't venture to the upper floors if you are sensitive. What you see there may require more than a lifetime of therapy. And now, we come to our set of rules that all bettors must follow to the letter, to ensure your fun and safety and, of course, the continuity of this place. It is crucial that you comply with each of them. Rule number 1. When crossing the casino doors, any type of recording or exposure is strictly prohibited. If you are caught violating this rule, our helpful security guards will be happy to make sure you never speak again. And no, we're not talking about death. There are infinitely more painful methods to silence someone, and believe me, you don't want to find out what they are. Our security guards would probably be applauded by the devil due to their cruelty. Rule number 2. There will be unlimited drinks and food as long as you keep betting. This casino is not for ordinary people. We need to make sure the bets flow constantly. So have fun, as the rewards here surpass anything other casinos can offer. It is possible to earn unimaginable sums of money, luxurious cars, people. Yes, you heard that right. Some players in certain games bet other people, and even their own bodies. So, when I say that you can have everything, I'm talking about everything, in the most varied senses. Rule number 3. It is common for some players to exceed their limits when betting. When you reach the point where you have lost everything and have nothing left to offer, your opponent will have the right to demand further compensation, and you will not be able to refuse. This means that if you want something terrible, like abusing his wife or children, our employees will make sure the winner's wish is fulfilled. And if you try something to avoid it, the punishment will be even more painful. After all, no one forced him to enter this place. Rule number 4. If a woman with wavy hair, green eyes, and a black dress invites you to a game session, refuse immediately. Although the invitation may seem tempting, don't be fooled by its beauty. You must leave the room at the same time or notify the nearest member of staff. This woman is a former client who developed an obsession with consuming human flesh. Since then, she has lived in this casino, hunting and devouring players in games that she manipulates to always win. If you accept the invitation, know that you will probably be eaten alive, and even if you cry out for help, we will not be able to interfere. Our priority is to ensure the satisfaction of all players, and that includes even cannibals. Rule number 5. Crashers are not tolerated. If by some miracle you got in without an access card, it's only a matter of time before you're discovered. All customers receive a unique tattoo and a chip under their skin that identifies them as a member of our club. No matter how long it takes, once you are captured, your body will be cut open and exposed to the players, who will place bets on how long you can survive. Our surgeons are all experts in torture that can last for hours without you actually dying or losing consciousness. Rule number 6. It is prohibited to hold informal conversations or offer food to employees. They are not ordinary people. Many of them are not even human. They are creatures from other dimensions, responsible for maintaining control of this peculiar environment. You will rarely see them consuming human food, as our casino accumulates a huge amount of dense energy from the players themselves. Regardless of your beliefs, it is essential that you understand that you are dealing with something beyond your understanding. The only goal is to keep playing. And remember, never, under any circumstances, ask about an employee's personal life. Rule number 7. To redeem your prizes and leave Casino Alegria, you will need to call one of our agents and express your desire. The reason may be funny, but many of our players end up never leaving after visiting this place. The demonic energies that surround the establishment can be so captivating that they often refuse to leave and can stay playing for days. Approximately 60% of our players end up becoming residents here. So, if you have someone special on the outside, think carefully about every minute you decide to spend here. Therefore, if you are successful in deciding to leave this place, you will wake up in your bed, and your prizes will be delivered directly to your home. Here, we know your life as if we had it in the palm of our hand. Rule number 8. Cheating is acceptable, as long as you don't get caught. As I mentioned before, our customers choose how they want to play. Therefore, if one of them chooses to offer a prize in a rigged game, it is your responsibility to realize this and leave the table before the end of the round. Otherwise, our agent will come forward and demand that you pay off your debt. If you refuse to pay, we will settle the debt to the other customer, but you will receive special treatment, with every one of your organs cut off while you are conscious. Here, we always manage to repurpose non-paying customers, and our guests love the wonderful dishes that the renowned chef prepares. Rule number 9. Upon entering the red zone, you will find an atmosphere similar to that of a strip club. Naked men and women walking around as if it were something slightly common. But don't be fooled. The interactions there are some of the most grotesque and often abhorrent to society. Be aware that the stakes vary at all levels, and big business people and influential figures from different fields often fill these halls. It is common to see people forced to provide services to more than 7 players at the same time, involving not only perverse fetishes, but mutilations and other disgusting things related to animals and even insects. Remember that when you enter this space, it is likely that you will not come out the same. Insanity will follow you, and please don't blame us as you have decided to step in on your own 2 feet. Rule number 10. Access to the management floors is strictly prohibited. We maintain a strict entertainment system, so you don't feel the need to explore forbidden areas. However, if you venture out and cross paths with one of our leaders, immediately kneel down, looking down, unless you wish to see your soul swallowed into the depths of the abyss. Remember, you won't be dealing with an ordinary person. Even if he was a customer on the upper floors, he would probably be treated like a filthy rat that just escaped from the sewer. Our manager is not human. He is a deity, much older than this world, and he will not care about his status or position. Whoever dares to say a single word to him will certainly not find his way back. Not home, not anywhere. Well, these are the rules. We hope you enjoy this charming and welcoming environment. We are all family here, and as long as you follow the guidelines, everything will be fine. We hope your stay at Casino Alegria is memorable. Remember, all your wishes can come true. Just a pinch of madness, desire, and courage to achieve them. I Want a Toy Truck for Christmas by Clancy. By the time I heard the line "Jingle All the Way" blare out from the little alarm clock across the room, I was already up and out of bed. I'd spent every waking moment of the night before waiting to hear that classic Holly Jolly Christmas tune call my name, and I couldn't waste any time postponing the festivities. After brushing my teeth and throwing on the old, Grandma got ran over by a reindeer Christmas sweater I bought down at the Goodwill for an absolute steal 5 years ago, I rushed down the hallway, decorated in bright, multicolored Christmas lights, and into the living room. My tree this year stood tall, burly, and lit up like you wouldn't believe. I usually just go with the standard reel and leave it at that, but last night I was looking at the tree after eating my dinner and realized it looked a bit dim. Perhaps the bulbs I'd been recycling for decades were finally starting to fail on me. Regardless, I took this opportunity to blast my Christmas spirit into high gear. I ran out to Walmart and bought 5 boxes of their finest colored Christmas lights. I would have bought more, but they said they were all out around this time and had to go in the back to even find those. I guess people don't usually wait till Christmas Eve to buy Christmas lights, right? Looking at my tree now, all 6 strands of lights, dim, original included, it looked absolutely gorgeous. I may have had to turn my head away from time to time when my eyes started to burn, but the beauty made it all okay. I closed my eyes and braced myself in anticipation to tilt them downwards and see the gift Santa had brought for me this year. I'd been really good this year. I made sure of it. I was naughty once, about 10 years back, and sure enough, I woke up that Christmas morning to find nothing but a stocking filled with coal. And I don't even put up stockings. I just found them shoved into one of my socks under the tree. Lifting my eyelids and looking under the tree, I let out an audible sigh of relief. I was good this year after all. Sitting there, under the tree, was one lonely little box, wrapped in bright white and blue striped wrapping paper, and tied at the top with an obnoxiously sized red bow. I darted under the tree and started shaking my present rapidly. Oh boy, I wonder what it is. Maybe it was a little toy truck, or maybe even a car, or a bike. Sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, I ripped the wrapping paper off with a few vicious swipes. Oh, thank you, Santa, I whispered to myself as I gazed on in admiration of my gift. Sure enough, Santa got me a little green truck with detachable wheels and fully openable doors. He really did know what I wanted. It doesn't really surprise me, but it always feels good to get that reassurance. As a kid, my parents always had me write letters sent straight to the North Pole to let Santa know what I wanted for Christmas. But as an adult, I found an even simpler way. Writing letters may work, but they can't beat the speed of sending your wishes straight to Santa with a messenger of your own thoughts. Every year when I figure out what I want, I just close my eyes and say, "Dear Santa, I've been really good this year and I'd really like a toy truck for Christmas. I know you're real, and I know you won't let me down. Thank you, Santa." And then I just go about my day. He hears it. I know he does. He has to. How else would I be getting these Christmas gifts back in return? After sitting on my living room floor playing with my new favorite toy for a few hours or so, I got up and made my way to the kitchen to enjoy the other best part of Christmas Day, the sweetest breakfast of the year. I got out the sugar milk I made a few days prior by pouring in a few cups of the finest cane sugar I could find, the frosted flakes, and my jug of maple syrup. Once I fill up my popcorn bowl with the cereal, I then lay on the syrup. I pour generously, just for the special occasion. I know I can't be doing this every day. I pour till the syrup gets about halfway to the top, and then I start laying on the sugar milk. I usually wait till it reaches about another fourth up the bowl, and my delicious Christmas feast is complete. There really is nothing like it, to be honest. Every time I lift a spoonful of those maple sugar milk frosted flakes to my mouth, I get a nearly orgasmic wave of nostalgia and Christmas memories. But letting those feelings take hold is a dangerous game. One that often leads to her. And once that happens, breakfast is over. I just miss her too much. I grabbed my coat off the couch, watered my plants in the garage, and walked straight out the door and into my car. If you've ever noticed a little neon green PT Cruiser on the road with a picture of Santa blown up and plastered across my back window, that might have been me. When I got to the Walmart, which is really the only store I ever go to in person now that I think about it, I put my car in park and just sat there a minute. I looked around at all the poor saps spending their Christmas walking around a Walmart parking lot, and then looked at myself in the rearview mirror. She would have had something really funny to say right about now. and we both would have laughed and I would have added on to it. Jesus, that would have been jolly. That would have been. I opened the door and breathed in the warm Christmas air. When I got home, I took off my shoes, slipping into some festive candy cane slippers, washed my hands, checked on the plants again, and then grabbed the bag of stuff I'd bought at the store. I walked up to the closet door in my bedroom, digging the keychain out of the How the Grinch Stole Christmas pajama pants I've been wearing all day. I noticed a scratch below the door's lock. I bent down to get a better look at it and ran my fingers across the imperfection. I hadn't noticed that before. Maybe I had made the scratch one night in my sleep or something, which isn't as hard to believe as you might think. I have one hell of a hard time getting to sleep, and when I do, strange things happen. But then again, maybe it wasn't made by me at all. Maybe it was made by her, and I just didn't notice it until now. I plunged the key into the lock and twisted with a jerk. I had just enough room to walk in and turn to my side. There stood yet another door, this one much more secure than my closet, or really any other door in my house for that matter, or maybe even any other door I've ever seen. I unlocked the first lock with the first key, the second lock with the second key, the third with the third, and on down to the 33rd. After that, I grabbed the bag I'd placed on the floor to my side, twisted the knob, and peered down the stairs and into the darkness that waited for me. Once at the bottom, I reached up on my tiptoes to flip the light switch placed impractically high on the wall to my left. And then, I looked at her. My basement wasn't finished. It was mostly just concrete slabs for walls, concrete slabs for the floor, and concrete beams to hold it all up. Off in the corner, maybe about 20 feet away or so, stood the concrete beam she called home. She'd been living there for a while now, ever since she didn't see things the way I hoped. A chain wrapped around and connected to the support beam led straight to her stainless steel ankle cuff. You know, I didn't realize it until then, but she was only a skeleton now, sprawled out on her back across the cold concrete floor. God, how long had it been? I thought it was just a few years, but it may have actually been a few years since that night. I was driving home from a job in my dad's pickup. I remember it so vividly now. I was driving along the highway late at night after dropping off my gifts to my associate when I saw that beautiful woman standing just off to the side, her arm raised in the thumb up. I still wonder how things could have been. I'm sorry, this year didn't go like you had hoped, I said, looking down at my slippered feet. It didn't really go like I had hoped either. But things will be better next year. I promise. I opened up the bag and looked inside. I got you a present for Christmas, I said, pulling out a brand new little toy truck. It was modeled after the early Ford models and came still in the box. I knew you were wanting this. I heard you. I explained as I walked over and sat the gift at the chained skeleton's feet. I looked to my side across the room at the perfectly stacked pyramid of hundreds of empty toy truck boxes. I closed my eyes and turned away quickly. Merry Christmas, darling, and thank you for calming down. When I opened my eyes, I stared into her empty sockets. She was thankful. I know she was. She told me. After locking the closet door and putting the keys back into my pocket, I walked to my kitchen and sat the Walmart bag down onto the table. I sat down and took the other toy truck I had bought out of the bag. After wrapping it and sliding it under the tree, I took a seat in my old wooden rocking chair and watched old holiday claymation classics. First Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, then The Year Without a Santa Claus, and then my favorite, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. After a while, I looked up to the clock on my wall to see it was already 9 p.m. I sighed and turned off the TV before walking to my room and flopping into my bed. I thought about what Santa had brought me that day, the delicious breakfast I'd had, and then I started thinking about work. Those plants, the clients, and I guess thinking about all that stressful stuff eventually led my mind to her. I then stared at the ceiling for the next 10 hours, like I do every night on Christmas Eve.